If you don't like that, just jump off now. There's going to be two sessions tonight. There's going to be Tim, and then later from Sam, who's not actually here yet. Tim Pentreath, most of you have probably heard of, passionate pilot, flyer, videographer, adventurer, and an undisputed fly sky high fanboy. He had a great chat the other day, which I thought was brilliant. But he's really embraced this whole Volbiv thing to the extent that he's featured on Cloud-Based Mayhem with Gavin McClurg, which was a really good session. So without further ado, grab a beer, everyone, and over to Tim.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the introduction. It's nice to be able to share my passion with you all. I know there's a few other Volbivers on here, but let's hope there'll be a few more by the end of it. So I'm going to share my screen. Hope this works. I'm going to minimize my little video thumbnails so I don't get distracted by the sight of myself rabbiting on. So yeah, this is what it's all about. It's yeah, Volbiv. One way of looking at it is cross country without retrieves, and it's liberating, as I hope you'll discover during the course of the next hour or so. So let's press on. So this is what we're going to talk about, just where it all started, a little bit about me, quite a lot about some of my trips, talk about kit, the Gumball Transalps Rally, which you may have heard of, a little project that Reese Fisher and I are putting together, the Volbiv Safari, and talk about some resources. So yeah, that was a rather nice spot at the northern end of the Dormiers, and we'll come on to that. So yeah, how did it all start, Volbiv? I think it started in about 30 years ago with this French guy, Didier Favre, who did, first of all, a 444, a CAP 444. And a 444 refers to the kilometers. He flew 444 kilometers, or traveled 444 in 1992. And then he did a much bigger one, 1,111 kilometers in 1993. And this involved lugging his hang glider up the hill, then he would leave it, then go back down again, get his kit, and walk back up again. So pretty hardcore. And he's obviously quite a character, because here he is in flight. This is genuine in flight. If you find this video on YouTube, you'll see him opening a bottle of champagne and then drinking it out of a glass, which is quite something. And I don't even think he spilt too much of it. So a little bit about me then. I started flying bloody ages ago, 1990, and I was evidently a bit of a slow learner, because it took me 10 years to do 50K. And then it took me a further 11 years to do my first 100K. And just for a laugh, I've got a little video clip, which I'll play you now. Some of you may have seen it already.
99.979899 100. Yeah, so that was no, again. Let's go back. Yeah, so that was after 21 years of flying, and it was you know, I guess I hadn't been trying that hard to do 100 kilometers. You know, the secret to doing 100 kilometers is actually going to a site where it's possible to do 100 kilometers. So that was from oh, what's it called? Liddington Hill, just near Swindon, down to near
well, Littlehampton actually, yeah. So yeah, that was a classic. Even if I did slightly bust airspace on the way. Then my PB so far is 220, which, yes, bloody hell, 6 years ago now. It feels a long time ago. So I really want to do another 200K one of these years. I've done lots of British Open competitions over the years. I've been an advanced XC serial team member and then ambassador team member since 2014. And so I get to go out to meet the guys in advance well, I'd say every year, but it's been a bit curtailed last year and probably this year. And I've been importing XC Tracer Varios since 2016. And with the current CAA rebate, it's been pretty busy, I must admit. Right, so that's a little bit about me. That's my first glider on the left, obviously, the Harley Contrail. And then I've got, I'm flying a Omega X Alps 3 at the moment, which is just a little bit of a step up in, in performance. Right, anyway, we didn't that. So yeah, let's talk about some of the trips I've done. So my first Vol Biv was just a one-nighter in 2016. Didn't do anything the following year. 2018, I did that first trip was with Nigel Cooper, who used to live down in Saint Andre. Then together we did a sort of tour around the Ecrins, which is this area here, together. And then 2019, the sort of precursor to the Gumball, we started in Saint Andre, and there was 4 of us, and I ended up in Andermatt in Switzerland, so about 500 kilometers. I had another little bonus one in end of August, early September, and this was flying to an advanced team meeting, and I've always wanted to do this little trip. It's about 150 kilometers, and it was meeting up at Spitz for the advanced team meeting. Well, it wasn't actually a team meeting, sorry, it was a party to celebrate the success of Kriegel and Patrick and Thomas and oh god, who was the other one? Can't remember now. We'll see in a minute. In the X Alps, and then finally last year did 800 kilometers over the course of 10 days, from starting in Saint Andre, ending up pretty close to Bassano del Grappa. So yeah, let's just run through some of these, and I will, you know, I've got a few slides for each one. I'll rattle through them and try and recount any amusing stories or anecdotes or particularly happy memories. But I mean, this one, I got up super early in the morning, flew from Bristol on the 7 o'clock flight, arrived at Nice at 10, and I was met by, I think Marcus gave me a lift, Marcus King, drove me up here. No, I'm completely wrong. No, I was actually staying in Saint Andre for a few days with Nigel, and we drove, his partner, Carol, drove us down to Col de Blaine, and we started there with there was a bunch of American guys staying with them as well, but only Nigel and me were Vol Biving. So yeah, just a straight cruise past Saint Andre, up the Dormiers, up to sort of Lac de Serponçon, where we camped up here, and then the next day we flew down here. But just such good fun. This is the spot where we camped, Lac Noir, and this is the following morning. It's just a wonderful spot. So nothing terribly ambitious, but just an overnighter. We didn't even have tents. I had a bivy bag and a mattress that went down every half an hour during the night. So it wasn't the best of night's sleep. So yeah, the next one was a couple of years later, again, in the same sort of area. This was the time when, yeah, I got up early, like 3 o'clock in the morning at home, flew from Bristol, Nice at 10 o'clock, on the hill, courtesy of Marcus, at about midday. took off about 1. And then I flew with, Marcus flew around for a bit, and Bruce Goldsmith happened to be there as well. But from about here onwards, I was on my own. Then I met up with Nigel here. I could see him on Fly Sky High, and then we were on the radio, and we crossed over from the Dormiers to the Morgon. And then over here, we were together sort of pretty much all the rest of the way. So we camped up here first night, and then here, and then we flew to Briançon, and then on the Wednesday, well, Nigel unfortunately bombed, but I managed to fly back to Saint Andre, and then I had a few more days before I was meeting my wife up here for a few weeks in a camper van. So I then flew out here. You'll see the reason why, and then hitched all the way up to here, and then made my way from here up to Lac de Aigues-Bel-Air. Anyway, yeah, so this is those of you who've flown at Saint-Jean or what's that place called? Saint-Vincent-les-Faux, just on here, will recognize this view. It's the Lac de Serponçon, and I'm just sort of soaring up the Morgon. And it is so beautiful there. It's just lovely. It's a wonderful place. And then we had a bit of a crux move, which I've crossed a few times now, but on this occasion, it doesn't really look like we're going to make it. Yeah, snuck over with about 50 feet to spare. And Nigel, yeah, he was the same. And you get past there, and you're just greeted. After a while, we got a thermal right back up to 3,000 meters. This is about 6 o'clock at night. Well, at night, in the evening, and it's just beautiful. This is the ski resort of Orsières, and we landed somewhere up here and camped somewhere around here. I think it was. Yeah, somewhere in this little area here. And it was a lovely spot. The next day we had good weather again, and you start off with the view of the Écrins sort of behind you. The biggest peak in Écrins is something like 4,000 meters, the Barre d'Écrins. And you've got these, wild country, and then you get into this area. Well, depending on the route you take, but you get into these areas with the sort of rolling green hills, real contrast. And then you're back in the sort of quite big mountains again. And we just cruised under this cloud street, Nigel and me, crossed over this mountain here, which is called La Pyramide. And then you're greeted by, this is the sort of other side of it, La Pyramide. You're greeted by this lovely area here of lakes and sort of flat grass called Massif du Taillefer. And we just thought, it's too good to sort of, turn down this. We'd flown about 60K for about, 3 hours or something. But it was a beautiful spot. Plus, more importantly, I'd had a P-tube malfunction about an hour and a half earlier, and everything was getting rather damp and horrible. So I was looking forward to swim in one of these lakes. And we landed just in this field here. That you can see Nigel just there. We landed here, and pretty much the first thing I did was strip off and go for a swim. And what a spot it was! I mean, you just can't find a nicer place than that, apart from the mosquitoes later on and the rain. But yeah, we'll gloss over those bits. But next morning, it was absolutely beautiful. I mean, you'd think the water was freezing cold, but it wasn't at all. It was really nice for swimming in. This was in July, I think. I seem to remember something like that. So yeah, that morning we had to hike about an hour just to find somewhere to take off. But it was incredible. We decided we weren't going to push any further north. That was the original plan, to sort of fly to Chamonix, but the weather in the Northern Alps wasn't so good, so we sort of decided to head east to Briançon. And it was fantastic flying in these clouds, or around these clouds. a real sort of playground. It was amazing. But it was a funny flight, this one. The first half we're cruising along at 3,500 meters, and the second half of it we were struggling to get above ridge height. And in fact, we were low in this valley between Briançon and Les Deux Alpes. Les Deux Alpes? Yeah. I might have that wrong. But the second half of it, from Col de Lothian to Briançon, was quite touch and go at times. And then the sky got a bit, well, it got a bit lifty. So we were spiraled off a load of height and decided to land in Briançon, which has a lovely old sort of castle and stuff. We end up landing down on the right-hand side here somewhere in one of these fields. I can't quite remember where. And it wasn't too windy, and we didn't get sucked up, and we didn't actually get hailed on. But what we did get was a really nice meal and a couple of beers before we got a lift with this lovely family up to the Col d'Izard, where we pitched up. And we thought we were facing a perfect sort of southeasterly facing slope. We thought we'd just be able to walk around to the right-hand side and find somewhere to take off. But there was a really quite a strong northerly wind, you know, i.e. blowing, as we look at it here, blowing from the back. So we killed a bit of time in the refuge, just downhill a little bit. We had to go down there to get some water, honest. And then, yeah, this is the view from the refuge Napoleon. And we ended up sort of, the Col d'Izard is up on the left here somewhere. And we ended up scrambling down this sort of slope. And then I think we took off from here, and it was really steep and pretty difficult to even just get your kit laid out and without, you know, losing anything rolling down the hill. I think we took so long setting up and getting ready and everything that actually we probably could have taken off at the, you know, where we'd camped, but just facing north. But anyway, we eventually got off okay. And I had, look at this. I mean, this are conditions to actually, you know, to die for. I had a fantastic sort of 5 or 6 hour flight back to Saint Andre. And in the end, just got up to about 3,000 meters and then had a sort of 17-kilometer final glide back to Saint Andre, which is here. And about an hour after I landed, the heavens opened and it just poured. So that night, back in Nigel's place, this is an old chateau that him and his partner Carol were renovating on behalf of this sort of wealthy Australian couple. And so I had a very nice sleep and shower and clean, you know, wash after that. So that was it for Nigel. He had to call it a day then. The next day I wanted to fly north again, but by, you know, midday the clouds were looking pretty big. So I just ended up flying out towards Dean, and you can see here some big showers there. And so, yeah, just get out the sky pretty quickly. And I managed to get a lift all the way to Valoise and then walked up the hill to Puy-Ayard. And here you can actually I was camping on the takeoff spot. But the next day was way too windy. And so I ended up having about a 12-mile walk up over quite high col, I can't remember what it's called, but and then down to Serre Chevalier, and then a little further hitch to the Col de Lothian, where I pitched up for the night. And magnificent spot. Next day, I actually hitched to Alpe d'Huez, I think it is, rather than Les Deux Alpes, Alpe d'Huez. Hitched there and took off and had a really nice flight for most of the way. It was interesting. The cloud base was sort of over 3,000 meters to start with, and then halfway into the flight it got down to 2,000 meters, which meant I never got across this. Well, I got across this valley, but not. There was a really strong valley wind blowing down here. I ended up having a bit of a torrid time before landing down in these fields on the left-hand side. Yeah, it was just the wind was blowing along it, and it was just rough and nasty. So that was the end of that trip for me. I hitched and met my wife in the camper van, and we we spent the next 3 weeks driving through France and Switzerland into Italy in time for the comp at Feltre that year. So moving on to the next year. This was the sort of precursor to the Gumball. So this was just over a week long. Similar sort of route, similar sort of views. You'll recognize that view. There's the Lac de Serpenson. There's that col, which we scraped over the year before. These are these rounded, sort of lovely, well, fairly gentle green hills. This is a Sanctuaire Notre Dame de la Salette, sort of monastery, well, not a monastery, but the female equivalent, I think. Actually, it might be, I think it's all both monks and nuns. And yeah, I landed just on the side of this hill here, and what a spot it was. Absolutely beautiful, slightly surreal hearing singing coming from the monastery in the evening whilst enjoying this perfect sunset. And I just wandered down the hill at one point to get some water. I passed the shepherd's hut, and here was a shepherd, chap called Nicholas, I think I remember rightly. And he was such a nice guy, early 20s. He spoke a bit of English, I spoke a bit of French, and I got a load of water from him. And then later on, he wandered up that evening, brought a big chunk of cheese and some apples. All I could offer him was a little bit of my whiskey and some of my crunchy bars, or one of them. So yeah, it was just a beautiful evening. It was lovely. The next day, met up with the guys again. Steve, then there's me and Minsek and Rich Chambers. And we hiked for about an hour, took off from pretty much here, I think, glided across this valley onto this slope here, where unfortunately Steve ended up in the trees after a little accident. He was okay, and he eventually pressed the SOS button on his InReach and was airlifted off. Because, I mean, he was fine, but it was just a pretty awkward, would have been a long, difficult walk down. I pressed on, and the others, Minsek and Rich pressed on, but they didn't get us. They bombed fairly early on. It was a pretty difficult flight. This is coming up to that's Grenoble there, and it was a bit of a tricky sort of place here. Quite low cloud base, as you can see over here, and I'm quite low. I end up sneaking around the side here into a bit of a headwind. Not brilliant landing options down here, but once around here, it was just a sort of cruise up the other side of the valley, the mountains there. And then by the time I got to opposite Saint-Hilaire, the sky had completely changed, and I wasn't going to get much further. But we decided over the radio during the trip to meet up at Saint-Hilaire, and I managed it. I flew. I got all the way across the valley, but just didn't have enough height to top land. So yeah, again, we all met up, and we actually stayed at campsite this time. The next day, quite low cloud base, but brilliant place to fly, so spectacular. And then you're heading north up towards, this is the Bauge Mountains. And you need more height than we had, which was about 1,800 meters to get north. There's a valley wind is blowing left to right. You want to sort of aim for here, get across here, where the slope is a bit more into wind, and then soar up here and then make progress northwards. But we were never going to do it, and I ended up landing in one of these fields down here on the right hand side. But every cloud has a silver lining, and we all regrouped by this lake. Beautiful lake for swimming, really nice and warm. Great spot, actually. We had a campfire that night. Yeah, terrific. And then next day hiked up to Mont Lambert, and it was really stable. You'd think with the valley wind blowing up towards Albertville, which is up here, you would have thought this slope here would have, you'd just get onto it and just soar right up to the top, but no way was that happening. It never got above the tree line. But it was a brilliant flight, so much fun, only about 30K. But like here, oh God, I remember this. And I mean, there are plenty of landing options. And I thought I was going to be landing in one of these fields sort of down here, but I managed to just scratch a lift out of here, got onto this slope, and then eventually, haven't got pictures, but eventually made it into Eugene, which is sort of just at the close to sort of Doussard, sort of in between Annecy, Albertville and Doussard. And so, yeah, we all had a rest day in Doussard, really. Minsek went off to fly with some of his mates. Rich and I just chilled and ate some salad and healthy food for a change, before that evening making our way up to Saint-Beuve, which is, it's got to be on anyone's, if you go to Annecy, you've got to check out Saint-Beuve. There's a chairlift which takes you up, and it is just a beautiful spot. There's not huge spaces to pitch your tent. There's only seems to be this sort of little grassy area here. It's really sort of undulating and rocky, but there is this refuge here, which we'll see again in another trip. But it's such a beautiful spot, and that's the view from the takeoff at the lower takeoff at Saint-Beuve, looking sort of northwest over.
I said come over because I couldn't see what was going on. I was just going to go on Zoom on that, but because I need to.
Oh, Nathan, maybe you can mute. Yeah. So yeah, this is looking over the Lake Annecy with the Tournette here, Forclaz somewhere around here, Les Dents here, beautiful. And the thing about Saint-Beuve, it's, if you climb up to the col, and it's only about 200-meter vertical, it takes about 20 minutes. You get such a good launch pad for morning flights heading north up the Aravis, which is where we are now. So this is the Aravis, and it's a sort of standard route if you want to get into the Chamonix Valley and beyond. So this is at the northern end of the Aravis, sort of I think it's called Point Percy, more or less, heading across to the Varan above Sallanches, which is here. Or is that Sallanches? No, this is Sallanches, I think. Mont Blanc here. So yeah, it's a pretty easy glide, about 7 or 8K, and you land, you end up arriving somewhere around here, and normally it's a pretty easy climb. Then it's a cruise down the Chamonix Valley, past Mont Blanc, past Lac d'Emerson, I think it is. We're actually in Switzerland at this point. And then it gets a little bit tricky. Is how you get into Switzerland. I'm not going to talk too much about routes here, but it went well for me this trip. And I'm sort of heading west on the south side of the Sion Valley here. I don't know what those mountains are particularly called, but I end up having a 175K flight that day. And this is the Aletsch Glacier, the biggest one in the Alps. And Fiche is just up this valley. The sort of Fiche takeoff is up here. And I landed somewhere here. Yeah, I landed just in this field here. And I'd spotted this hotel here, and I thought, I've had 6 hours in the air. I'm gasping for a beer. But would the bloody landlady, whatever you call her, manager, give me a beer? No, it was too late. She was shutting up, wouldn't even sell a single beer, which was a bit disappointing. But once I packed up, found a spot, any thoughts of a beer sort of disappeared. I mean, what a view. I was going to sort of try and camp in this, where I'm standing, but actually there were a load of cows roaming around. So I ended up finding this in that little hut you saw in the previous picture. It was sort of fenced off with electric fence. So I just managed to sneak my tent in right in the corner here to keep out of the way of the cows. but it was a great spot, really lovely. And then the next morning went for an ice cold swim in this little lake behind it. God, absolutely took my breath away. And then final day of that trip, I flew with Robert Smith, who lives half the year in Andermatt, and this is the this is not the glacier above Fiche. This is I can't remember what it's called, but it's basically the source of the Rhone. This glacier, maybe it's called the Rhone Glacier, above the Grimsel Pass, and then made it to Andermatt. Where I'd actually flown past here the previous year, and the wind was, there was obviously very light winds the previous year, gentle, you know, thermic winds blowing up the south-facing slopes. And I was thinking, same, it's going to be the same again. And I was looking at these windmills at the top here, you can just about see, and I was desperately trying to work out which way they, you know, I was trying to work out if I know which way they're turning, do I know, kind of work out where the wind's blowing? And for whatever reason, I got it wrong and ended up flying here into a sort of area of rotor and was tossed around for a little bit. And I thought, okay, that's it. I've had 8 days. Let's call it a day here. And I landed just down, you know, I'll just go back. I just landed down in this field here in Andermatt. I soared here for a bit because clearly the wind was actually blowing from the north, coming up this valley, hitting here, and I could have soared here all day, but base wasn't. I just couldn't find a good climb to make progress. So that was the end of the trip. But going back to the wind turbines, the rule is if you can see them turning clockwise, then that means the wind is blowing from you towards them. So that, just try and remember that one. If they're going clockwise as you're looking at them, then the wind is blowing from you towards them. And that applies to all wind turbines. They're all like that. And yeah, check it out for yourself. So I actually got a lift with yeah, I wasn't flying. Yes, yeah, I was flying with Rob, but he landed earlier. And so he gave me a lift back to Grimsel Pass, and I pitched up here for the night. Beautiful spot. The next day, looking a bit bleary and rough after 8 days, I sort of just made my way I just found a takeoff to glide down the valley. The forecast was for strong winds, and I went past this sort of obviously memorial to a pilot, which was quite poignant. Before taking off and just gliding down the valley and landing right outside the co-op. And look at all that fresh veg. I've never been so excited to see some fruit ever before. And so I made my way back to Geneva Airport, where I met up with Rich again for about the most expensive beer I've ever bought anyone. But it was worth it. It was great catching up with him. Him and Minsek Minsek had gone home a day early, and Rich had a couple of days in Chamonix, or a day in Chamonix. I think he had a quick flight there. So that was that trip. I need a swig of beer. So this was the little bonus trip in 2019. Just like a weekend trip this was. But it was brilliant. It's just crazy. You can, leave the airport bright and early, or leave your house bright and early. In fact, in this instance, I dossed down the night in Bristol Airport because it just didn't seem worth getting up at 3 o'clock. So I slept in Costa at Bristol Airport. There were some British lads on the same plane, and they gave me a lift from Geneva to Annecy. They dropped me off at the Plonfay takeoff. It was pretty stable to start with, but eventually I managed to climb out, got above the Dance, and then headed northeast. And it took an age before I got up to 3,000 meters, but eventually I did. And just what I did, because there's a big valley crossing here. This is Clues, and you have to get across this little ridge and then onto the ridge behind here. Oh, I can't remember the name of there's a ski resort there. Got there really low, climbed up just about. And then next stop was Avoriaz, which is this ski resort here. And I hadn't been here since, I think, 1998, when there was a British Open here, or at Morzine, which is across the valley to the left here. And one of the tasks that during that comp, I remember we were scratching along these cliffs trying to get height. There's like, 100 of us all beating, scratching up and down here. And eventually we sort of got a bit of a climb here. We had to take photos of a building in those days. No GPS, it was all done by photos. So it's pretty difficult to find the right building. You just had to sort of hope you had it in. I remember on the way back, Guy Anderson, he had a big collapse and the glider went right in front of him. As it came back out, it whipped his helmet off and the helmet crashed down on one of these chalets. I don't know if one of these chalets down here, or I'm not sure where it was. He in his pal, may he rest in peace, he was a safety officer. He got on the radio to Guy, say, "You've got to land, you haven't got a helmet." So that was, so I think Guy dined out on that for a while. But yeah, look at this, it's beautiful. Got up to 3,000 meters, sort of a bit further on. Here I am. This is Lake Geneva. This goes down into the Martigny Valley, down here, the sort of windiest valley in the Alps. But at this point, it's nice and wide. I've done about 70K, I suppose, or 75K. And there's some quite big clouds developing here. And I was hoping to get across here onto these hills and then just carry on up here. But I got across here and it just didn't work. So I found myself landing in this little village. And I landed actually just there by that little shed. I thought, oh, I'll just camp somewhere here. It looks pretty nice. And just as I was packing up, this couple came out who owned a B&B and said, "Oh, we've got no guests. Why don't you camp in our garden?" There's the website, a little plug there. Good skiing nearby. And yeah, it was really roughing it. They had a little plunge pool. And yeah, super couple, Paul and Catherine. So yeah, the next day, Reese, you'd like these. Had a pretty nice walk up for about a 3-hour hike up to the takeoff, passing all sorts of mushrooms, which some of them are edible, I'm sure. And it was grey and cloudy, but the sun eventually came out and I had a really unexpected flight, about 40K, and ended up landing up this valley, just about sort of 30 or 20 kilometers from Spitz, where I was trying to get to. This guy, he didn't speak a word of French. I don't know what language he spoke. He must have been German, but it didn't sound like German. I think he was sort of Dutch or whatever. But this is a valley called Farmelberg, and the advanced guys say it's pretty incestuous out there. So maybe that they got their own little language. But anyway, he gave me a lift up the hill, and I eventually pitched up in this accommodation for the night. So not quite as luxurious as the night before, but it started pissing with rain, and so I was very glad to have a roof over my head, even if inside was a little bit basic. But there was this amazing sort of 15 minutes when the clouds just rolled up the valley. I've got a time lapse of this. It's in the video of this flight, and they just rolled up the valley and spilled over this sort of ridge here. Just beautiful. Anyway, the next day I had hoped to just be able to sort of at least climb up the hill behind and take a glide, but it was misty and raining and blowing, and it was clearly on. So I had a pretty epic 21-mile walk, mainly downhill, which I guess is easier. Down to Spitz. Yeah, I think it took about 9 hours. I was absolutely knackered by the end of it. So the point of all this, which I didn't really explain terribly well, but was to meet up with the various friends of Advance to celebrate the Advanced success in the X Alps in 2019. So I got a cable car up to Nissen in the morning, and actually you could see because there was so much rain the night before, the cloud base was really low. But we were meeting up somewhere on it was on the idea we had to meet up here basically at a sort of mountain. Actually, it wasn't really a restaurant; it's more just a cheese farm. So I ended up just gliding straight across here. There wasn't a thermal to be found at that point. Met up with the Advanced guys. Here we got Thomas, Kriegel, Aaron, and Patrick. Yeah, so it was worth it just for the selfies. And we had a pretty nice mellow evening, actually, as you can see. What a spot that was. So yeah, that was a really nice little, four-day trip. Just, you don't need to go for epic long trips. You can do short trips. And that brings me on to this little mission 2 years ago. Thought it'd be fun to do one on the south coast. The forecast looked good. In the end, I didn't do quite as much as this. I almost could have made it to Sidmouth, but it was just too windy by the time I got here to take off safely. But yeah, I'm just going to flip through this, but ended up, well, I'll just go back to the map. This is Ypres, down near West Bay, near Bridport. Flew along this bit, hiked 12 miles, and eventually, down to here, camped here for the night, hiked here the next morning. But yeah, like I said, it was too windy. So I ended up getting a lift, back to Ypres or West Bay, and end up flying around here. Actually, the wind had dropped by that point. But yeah, you don't have to go to the Alps. Don't have to do it in the summer. Just be a little bit creative, really. This is where I camped. Wasn't quite sure where I was at night time when I arrived at 8 o'clock. But the next morning, woke up to this lovely view. A bit of a hike, and then this is flying later on that day after I got back to Ypres. So yeah, have fun on those little trips as well. And then we'll rattle through this one. This was last year with 8 of us on the gumball. Started in Saint-André, and then cruise up the Dormeurs. This time I was camped with Reese at Col de Palestre, so a little bit of a different place than Orsières, which is just off to the left here. I think, can't remember what perspective I'm looking at here. This is in the morning actually, so this is facing east. Yeah, so Orsières is sort of coming up under the sun there. And then 140k flight north up to landing in Eugene again. A day in, it's funny, it's very similar to the year before. A day in Doussard when the weather wasn't quite so good. Then up to Saint-Beuve again, where bumped into these guys who were doing a Volbiv course with a school called École Carpe Diem, and they're based, I think, around the Annecy region. So they were all pretty low airtime pilots doing a Volbiv course, but just using single skin gliders, which was quite a nice idea. So they weren't going for XCs at all. They were just basically taking off in the morning and gliding down. But they seemed to be enjoying themselves. And the reason why we were all sheltering under here, we slept under this refuge as well, is because there was a really heavy rainstorm at one point. But here we go, the next morning, beautiful day. Heading up the Aravis again. Went past Chamonix, and then the move I made the previous year and got down to Fiche didn't work this time, and I ended up landing in one of these fields here. Yeah, just this little grassy bit right there. Or no, this bit here, right here. this is renowned as one of the windiest valleys in the Alps. So you want to be very careful when you're landing here. I had checked before I had to make a decision what the wind was doing. I used the Météo Suisse app, which you can get sort of, you know, wind readings from various wind stations in the valleys and on mountains. And it was about 20 km an hour. So it was quite okay landing here. You know, I wasn't going backwards at any point. But I wouldn't have wanted it to pick up much more. So this is the Rhone Valley. So where we saw the glacier in some of the early pictures, and features up the other end, far end of this valley. So the Rhone flows down here into Lake Geneva, and then wends its way down to the south of France. And then we had a day of bad weather, and I pulled the family card. I remembered my brother's wife's family have an apartment in Verbier, so I'm not camping in 2 days of rain. And then Chris met up with me the next day, and we had the nights in the apartment. So I had 2 nights there, drinking wine and beer and generally chilling out. The next day, this was the sort of, in terms of distance and you know, hours in the air and spectacularness, this was you know, the flight of this trip, 190k down to Bellinzona. Just, you know, stunning scenery. This is crossing over from the Sion Valley into the Airola Valley, and you basically follow this valley all the way down here to Bellinzona. Just beautiful. But then I landed low. I'd set a goal in the landing field at Bellinzona. And then having got there, I thought, oh, it's not such a great place to really camp, because I thought the next day wasn't really going to be flyable. So I didn't want to be high. That's why I landed low. But I did eventually find somewhere in this sort of linear park between the river and the town. And actually it was fine. It was pretty quiet. There was another, someone else wild camping. I think they were cyclists wild camping in the park. The next day I started hiking. I was going to hike for something like 2,000 meters vertical to find somewhere to take off and glide. And I walked about a mile or two and then thought, this is ridiculous. Especially as I looked to the west, I could see actually the sun was coming out. So I turned around, went up to this takeoff at Mornira, which is about 1,300 meters above Bellinzona. And it's a beautiful spot. And actually, as somewhere to camp, it would be perfect. In fact, Chris, who he camped here the night after I was down in town. But there's a river and you can have a swim or at least a wash. Then the next day, actually, once I did get airborne, I mean, it turned out it was just such an unexpected flight, really, because I was expecting just a glide, you know, after a big hike. And it turned out really good. I did 100 kilometers that day, including having this really great sort of few minutes with this eagle. We were therming together. And then at one point, he just tucked his wings in and just dived out of the sky. It was quite incredible, the speed he'd obviously seen something and he was just focused on it entirely. Amazing. Yeah, so this is Lake Como, I think, the sort of northern end. I'm looking back, the word came, looking west here. I'd come from these mountains and I'm just trying to get a bit of height here, which didn't work. But eventually I ended up here, Monte Padrio, which was a beautiful spot on top of this hill, looking west, just a perfect spot with a few goats and sheep. Have you ever seen a sheep with such long ears? It just, yeah, their bells were just tinkling away all night. It was really lovely. Next day, about 60k, flying past these old World War I fortifications, I think they were. A really beautiful moment of cloud surfing halfway along that flight. And then I landed and hiked a bit and met this little family who were bivvying up there with their kids in one of the refuges further up the mountain. And in fact, where this bench is where I stayed for the night, just inside this little fence. It wasn't electric, but just to keep the horses out. there were signs everywhere saying watch out for bears, but I never saw any. So this is the next morning, and this was the view, so pretty heavily inverted, as you can see, but had a great flight. Every now and then you come across these, now there's a word for this, I can't remember what it is, where you see faces in sort of inanimate objects. But it was a really challenging flight, just really scratching. At one point I spent an hour scratching up this one slope just to gain, I think, about 400 meters in the end. Slow and persistent, but patience was the order of the day. But some spectacular views. This is also on not the main Dolomites. It was on the edge, it's to the southwest. It's called the Dolomiti del Brente, and it's pretty spectacular. The recent, I say recent, I think September, the Dolomiti Man event, Dolomiti Man or the Fly Dolomiti. I can't remember what the hike and fly event is, but that goes all around here. And I landed, and I was just about to try and hitch or find a bus or something, and this guy rocks up on his motorbike, and turns out he was a paraglider pilot. So I hopped on the back of his motorbike, and he gave me a lift to a place where I'm going to get a bus ride. And I eventually made my way to Levicho Terme. So his lift, and then a couple of bus rides, and I was in Levicho Terme. In time for a swim in the lake there, which was lovely. But the trouble with towns, again, it's really difficult to find somewhere nice to stay. So I ended up walking up the hill out of town a bit, and just finding this garden of this house that was being renovated. So it looked a bit of a tip, but actually it was fine. It was quiet and wasn't disturbed at all. The next day, again, it was stable as hell to start with. I lost half my height, ended up losing about 500 meters, no, maybe more, I can't remember, scratching around the trees to get a bit of height. And eventually, I think, about 40K that day. I ended up in this valley, not being able to get further because cloud base was too low. It had been about 2,500 meters at one point, and then by the time I got further east, it was down to about 1,600 or 1,700. And there was just no way. I wanted to get to Feltre, but there was just that wasn't going to happen. And it was a bit rock and roll down this valley. So I ended up landing in this field here, actually. It wasn't too windy. I figured because the reason I went for this valley, I figured because it wasn't a main valley heading sort of north into the main Alps, that it wouldn't be that windy. It's more sort of an east-west valley, and yet there was some wind, but it wasn't crazy windy. It was perfectly safe. Yeah, so I landed and sort of thought, the last couple of nights I've been so hot and been bitten, and I ended up having a swim in the river and just thinking, I'm going to call that a day. So I hiked to the nearest town, and there always seems to be bars opposite the bus stops, which was very convenient. And ended up getting a bus to Bassano, and stayed with a friend of a friend in Bassano, right by the landing field. And that was the end of that trip. But the flight back from Venice was awesome, because we went right over all the places I'd flown the previous days. Here's that valley I was telling you about, that east-west valley. I landed somewhere just somewhere around here, I think. Then the next slide. Yeah, these are the Dolomiti del Brente. So this is the valley I flew down the day before, and I landed here and then hiked up to here and took off from here. And then finally, a fantastic view of Kent as I came in. So that's enough of my trips. I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the kit now. Are we okay for time-wise, Mike? Another 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, go for it.
5, 10. So there's an awful lot of kit here. I've got it all logged in a Google spreadsheet if you want to find out what I've got. And just a sort of idea of weights and things. I've got it grouped into various sort of categories. Almost 24 kilograms with about 3 kilograms of water. But of course, you're not carrying all of that. You're wearing some of it, and like hiking poles don't count because you're obviously, you know, you're not carrying them. So in terms of what I was actually carrying, including water, was about, would have been about 22 kilograms, which ain't so bad. So we got my kit list in this link, and I'll produce a PDF of some of this, maybe without all the pictures, but with some of the links. So my kit list is in here, and then Reese Fisher put together this communal sort of kit list where if you want to benchmark your kit against everyone else's, you can just open this and add a new tab for your own kit, and he will you know, work out the averages and see how you compare. So yeah, that's most of the kit sort of laid out. I'm not going to go through it all. We're sort of running out of time, but we've got a separate page on sleep system. So it is important to have a bit of comfort out there. Yeah, it's important getting to sleep, getting as much sleep as possible, which, I mean, I don't think anyone sleeps brilliantly in a small tent. But you may as well make it as, you know, give yourself the best chance of it. So yeah, I've got this down quilt, which is really nice. It's not as restrictive as a sleeping bag, I find. That was about 80 quid from AliExpress. And I think one of the best sleeping mats is the Thermarest Neo Air X-Lite. I'm sure quite a few have got this one. When it's blown up, it's about 5-6 centimeters thick. It's pretty good actually. It's very comfortable, so I'd recommend that. Tent wise, I've been using this tent for the last 3 years or so, and it's pretty good. The only downside of a single skin tent obviously is that you tend to get condensation in it. So next year, well, I've just ordered one. It hasn't arrived yet, but I'm going to try out one of these, which is basically I mean, it's basically a tent, but it's a sort of more of a tarp type tent. You don't have to use the inner mosquito net thing, but rather than just having an open front, it's got this extra sort of flap here, which if you are in bad weather, will keep the rain out and give you quite. It's difficult to see from these photos, but I'm hoping it will give you quite a decent sort of area to put your kit in as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to that arriving, as that's about 80 quid, again from AliExpress. Flight avionics. Yeah, so Anker solar panel. I've found that having a solar panel that's charging up a spare battery whilst you're flying works really well. So I've got two of these Anker batteries. So one is powering the phone during flight, and the other one, which I would have used the day before, is being recharged. So when you land, I always found it was fully charged after I landed. So yeah, here's my XE Tracer 2 Flam. So that's solar powered, so you don't have to worry about charging that up at all. There's a battery, yeah, and a Garmin InReach Mini for tracking and sort of emergency and just messaging if you've got no mobile signal. As I say, I use iPhone with Fly Sky High, and just I've got this little picture of a video camera up here to remind me of the story of how I got this picture, because I have the camera, my GoPro, mounted on my helmet, and you wouldn't normally be looking down like this. But I found this latest GoPro, well, it's a GoPro 8 actually, there's a 9 out now, but it takes great video, but the firmware is a little bit flaky, especially when it's connected to an external battery. And I just couldn't get it get it working. It wasn't turning on. I didn't know if it was on or off, but whatever it was doing, it wasn't doing anything. So I had to take, this was the first opportunity crossing this lake to actually take my helmet off. I had to take my helmet off, open the back of the, or take the sort of foam cover off the, you know, the wind slayer off it, open up the battery compartment, take the battery out, and then plug it back in again. And then finally, as I put, you know, finally it was working, and this picture just got, you know, taken, or this film got taken as I was putting the video camera or my helmet back on my head, hence the sort of angle of it. But actually, it's quite a good. It worked out quite well. But yes, that's a bit disappointing in terms of the firmware. I've done a couple of updates since then, I think, so maybe it's fixed. I just haven't had a chance to really try it. So yeah, that's that's some of my trips. That's the kit. Hopefully by now you're feeling inspired and want to go out and you know, do your first vol biv. So how do you take those first steps? Well, it obviously depends on your experience. I mean, I had tons of experience, but it took me ages to get around to doing one. So, I mean, like I say, you don't have to go out to the Alps to do it. You can just have a great time, even in winter in this country. But Scotland, I mean, you guys up there, you're blessed with some of the best flying in the world, really. So, okay, the difficulty is stringing together 2 or 3 days of good weather. But if you do get those, you know, beautiful high pressure sort of systems setting up in spring, then, I mean, I'm going to be up there like a shot if I can to try and do a little Scottish vol biv. So yeah, the thing about vol biv, it's not all about the XC flying. You don't have to have XC, you know, epic flights to have a great time. It's all the people you meet on the way, the hitchhiking, the hiking, just spending time with your mates. So I'd say if you've got over on the left hand side, if you've got lots of comps experience and you've been on sort of independent holidays to places with a couple of mates, as opposed to guided holidays, and if you're flying 100-kilometer mountain cross countries, then join the Gumball this year, or just plan your own trip with some friends. In the middle here, if you've done sort of 3 or 4 comps and you're flying sort of 75-kilometer mountain XCs, then again join the Gumball for you know, company and mutual support. I mean, I stress it's not organized. You have to be an independent pilot, but sometimes what you just need is the comfort that you're not going to be alone out there. If you've only done like 1 or 2 guided holidays in the mountains, and you know, you're doing sort of sub 25k XCs, then you want to have a go in, you know, in the UK first. Go down to South Wales or Scotland, or the Lake District, or somewhere, or Snowdonia, and just have a bit of fun there, or join do a vol biv course. So yeah, what is the Gumball Transalps Rally? So it's not an official event. It's just a group of like-minded pilots flying and camping together. Nothing's organized. It's just, you're just there for, you know, mutual support and the crack. So if you're thinking of joining it, you've got to be an independent pilot. You're not going to be wanting to be, don't expect to be guided. So the first one we did was, as I say, last year with 8 or 9 pilots. Next year, you know, assuming we can get out there in mid-July, we're going to start in Saint-André, and we've had a lot of interest this year, and who knows, we might even get 20 or 30 pilots, which would be awesome. I guess we'd naturally form into little pods of pilots of similar levels. So if you're interested, just drop Reese a line. There's his email address there, reese@unvanity.com. This sort of brings me on to a little tiny plug for a vol biv course that Reese and I are putting together this year. It's not really a course, it's a season-long coaching progression course. So we've already started with 4 pilots, doing Zoom sessions each week or every 2 weeks. It sort of varies. It's normally a week of a week going through a particular topic, and then the following week is a exercise week. Setting some tasks, not physical exercise, route planning or stuff like that. And then we're going to have 3 week-long trips over the season: June, July, and August or September. We haven't decided yet. So if you're interested in that, get in touch with Reese again, or with me. As I say, we've got 4 pilots. We're only looking for 1 more place. We don't want to. It's the same pilots we're working with the whole season long, and the guys who are on it are typically around about the 50 to 75 hour mark. So we're not looking for really experienced pilots. These are pilots who've been out in the mountains a little bit, love the idea of Volbiv, and want to, progress rapidly. There are other people who do courses. These are the guys I mentioned who I bumped into in Saint-Beuy near Annecy, École Cap Diem, and this one, alpwind.fr. Marcus King did a weekend course with them. So some resources if you want to find out more. So we've got the UK Volbiv Pilots Facebook group. I've got a ton of videos on my YouTube channel. Greg Hamilton's got some great stuff on his YouTube channel. In terms of weather on the go, I haven't really touched on that so far, but Meteo Parapont is great. Soaring Meteo, Meteo Blue, Meteo Swiss. There's apps for those. Well, Soaring Meteo isn't an app; it's a website. But the others have all got apps. Planning. flyxc.app is great. You can see the routes. Obviously Google Earth as well to sort of visualize the terrain you're going to be flying over beforehand. Kit we've got in those Google documents that I mentioned before, and these are all links on here. So like I said, I will produce a PDF of these. So yeah, if you've got any doubt, just don't hold back, give it a go. Even if it's take small steps first. No need to try and do 800 kilometers across the Alps in your first trip. Just have a fun overnight camping in Scotland. Why not? So that is it. Over to there may be a ton of questions in the chat which I haven't seen. I'm going to stop the sharing now and hand it over to you guys.
Tim, that was brilliant, really inspiring and just fantastic. And it's a great approach to flying that I think.
Yeah, it's completely liberating. Not having to worry about getting back to your car or catching a train or anything. Having your kit with you is fantastic. And certainly, if I'm lucky enough to get up to Scotland this year, I'll just have have a kit with me, have a tent with me, and a sleeping bag, and it doesn't matter if you bomb out or if you land in the middle of nowhere. You can just, if it looks great, just keep on going.
Yeah. Okay, there's a few questions. I'll just scroll down and see the ones. Were you picking your camping spots from the air, from Neil Rowling?
Hi, Neil. In some places, yes, yeah. I mean, we were not the exact spot necessarily, but yeah, on some of the trips we had ideas of where we wanted to camp at. Other times we'd been there before, like Aussiers, I'd camped before, so so people camped there. People were aiming for there on this latest trip. Reese had been to Col de Palestre before, so this time I made it across there and camped with him. But yeah, the Massif du Taillefer, Nigel had sort of looked at the maps before and figured that might be a nice place. But when on my own, like that place near Fiche, I saw that from the air. I mean, I knew I wanted to land there. What you're really looking for, it's not necessarily a camping spot, but is somewhere where you can take off again the next day. I mean, that's that's what you're looking for. So somewhere with a southeasterly or south facing slope, so you can get away the next day, even if that involves a bit of a hike. And I mean, to be fair, most places in the Alps, you're not going to have to hike for too far to find somewhere to launch.
Cool. And Robert Andre Mickelson, you guys overloaded on your wings when doing Volbev, and if so, by how much?
So I'm a little bit overloaded, probably a couple of kgs overloaded. So my glider is 95 to 110, and normal UK. Where when I've done this last year, when I did the Dragon Hike and Fly comp, I obviously sort of I carried as little gear as possible, and I was about I think about 103 kilograms. Normal XC flying, I tend to have a little bit of ballast, and I just carry a bit more clobber. So I'm about 106, 107 maybe, and Volbev I'm about 112. So it's not that much more, because a lot of it you're carrying anyway, and I got rid of a little bit of back protection and the big foam pad underneath the seat in my Lightness 3, so you can take less as well of your normal flight.
I see that Reese has actually answered quite a lot of these questions,
yeah.
so he's done a pretty good job for you. Paddy's moaning about the weather in the Alps. Paddy, you should know the weather in Scotland's a lot worse than the Alps.
Yeah.
Kit list, blah, blah, blah.
That, yeah.
Ear, bearded vulture, bird spotting. What size wing are you on from Molly Bear?
I've got the size 24, and I weigh around about 87, 88 kgs.
A question from me, do you prefer doing a trip on your own, for the isolation thing, or is it better with mates?
I think a mixture is perfect. I mean, that isolation is quite special when you just, like that day when I had that unexpected flight after the big flight, and I flew 100k and ended up at Monte Padrio, was just such a lovely spot, and just beautiful evening. But on the other hand, it would have been super nice to have a couple of others to share it with. It's, you've got to be comfortable with your own company. But after on this last trip, I spent the last sort of 4 days, I suppose, and I was could have done with a bit more company for sure towards the end of it. But other people are different. Some people do big solo Volbibs, and it's they're totally happy. But it's horses. It's just whatever suits your personality, really.
And here's a good final question from Ben Wiley. Do you prefer hike and fly to XC?
Oh, well, do you mean just pure? I mean, hike and fly, I see hike and fly and Volbiv are sort of a little bit different, I would say. Hike and fly to me is more what you do in the autumn in the Alps, when you just hike up and have a lovely, smooth fly down, autumn or winter. So if the question is really Volbiv versus XC, then Volbiv really, because I mean, you get the XC element, but you're not just, it's just so much more than just the flying. It's all the other adventure that goes with it. Does that answer your question, Ben? You mean competitive XC? I've just seen you. Yeah, I haven't done the league for a few years now. I got a bit bored with that, mainly because if you're busy and you can't get out on those really good days, you just feel like you're losing points. You never catch up, and also because of the rules, they can be quite strict at times. And like 2 years ago, we had the North-South Cup in the Lake District, and on the Sunday, it was like the best conditions ever in the Lake District, and there's like 5,500 foot cloud base and hardly any wind, and we all did triangles. I did a 65k triangle, but right at the end, I just touched down briefly as I was sort of just scratching up Blees Fell, and I took off again a minute later. But I would have
if I'd been doing the league, then I would have lost like 200 points. And I would have been gutted. It would have spoiled it completely for me. But as it was, I wasn't doing the league, and it didn't make the slightest bit of difference. I took off again and finished the triangle. And so, yeah, I mean, I record my flights on X Contest for sure. It's really nice having a record, especially on X Contest, because you've got this sort of flying buddy system, so you can see other people who you flew with that day. So it's great for comparing tracks. But yeah, I don't miss the competitive XC bit at all.
Well, Tim, on behalf of everyone, thank you so much indeed. That was fantastic. And at this point, usually on an LLSC club night, everyone would go off for a piss and to get another beer. So not suggesting everyone does that, but it's a good point to move on from the sort of chilled approach to multi-day flights in the Alps and look at another strand, and that's introducing a little bit of a competitive element, just as you've been talking about there, where you've got the X-Alps as the ultimate sort of bonkers end of a host of mini X-type events. Now in the UK, Sam Smith, a local pilot from Scotland, who's been flying since 2016, flying everything from speed wings to tandems. He's got a great love of the outdoors, but he's also been thinking about a league for hike and fly as an important stepping stone. So he's joining us from the middle of the North Sea, where he is currently hanging off a rig usually, to explain and demonstrate some of his ideas. So he also thinks that the Ochils is the Alps, but I can tell him it certainly isn't the Alps. Sam, over to you.
Thanks very much, Mike, and thanks very much, Tim. As you said,
Okay.
I'm on a platform, so if my internet drops out, please do continue without me. You've got my PowerPoint, and hopefully it won't take too long. Just quickly, someone raise your hand if you can hear me. Yes, thank you, David. Brilliant. Right, I'm going to share a screen with you now. It's another PowerPoint, I'm afraid, but it's only 10 slides. So hopefully it won't take too long to get through. And if you do have any questions, stick them in the chat, and we'll try and deal with them at the end. If there's a slew of questions, we'll stop and have a go at them just now. So yeah, very inspiring to see your talk, Tim. What I've been thinking about here is trying to make the best use of what we've got available to us at the moment. Definitely the coronavirus lockdown is a big motivation for that. So SHNF, the Scottish Hike and Fly League, is basically a way of attaching a score to a hike and fly day. Hike and fly in this case is just about being able to travel across terrain using both your hiking and your flying skills. Scoring something that we do for fun is always going to be difficult. And in order to try and basically make a game that we can play, all I've done is I've taken the distance scoring from the XC League, which is typically scored as a distance over 5 points, unless you've got a declared flight or circuit, and then adding a height bonus for the hills that you go up. So that means that while you may not be flying great distances XC over the winter, you can string together a number of hills and still rack up quite a decent score. So the idea started as a chat between some mates. How can we do this? And let's all get together on a given day and do a race to goal, which would be lovely. And since we've been trying to do it, we have not managed it in 3 years. So the idea would be that we can have something we can apply wherever we are. And through the lockdown, where we've been able to get out flying locally, I know Mike's put some really impressive days in the Pentlands, and I've been doing my little bit as well in the Ochils. The photo on this slide shows Mike flying his advanced Pi. I think it's an 18-meter wing, that one, over at Edinburgh. And to the off to the north, you can just about make out the Ochils, which are my locals. Both sets of hills are about 300 to 600 meters high and extend about 10 to 20 kilometers east to west, depending on how you cut them. So I'm just going back to my notes for a second. The reason to run this as a league is so that you can do it on any day at any time. And while that does bring some benefits, but you're not so dependent on the weather, it does also include a few complications, which I will get onto on this slide. I've spoken to the BHPA, to Mark Shaw, who's the technical advisors, and to Mark Asquith about the entry requirements. And I realise it's not been very popular, but I'm unable to open this this league, allow entry of any flights for anyone who's not pilot rated or above. And that's simply because of my liability as an organizer. I'm not worried about getting sued by somebody who, in taking part in a fun comp, sprains their ankle or wraps their wing around a cow. I'm worried about getting sued by the owner of the cow, who, when they realise that the owner of the paraglider is not insured for what they're doing, might come after me. And because it's a league and not a set competition on a set day at a set place, it also requires that the participants take responsibility for their own equipment and so on. Now, hopefully, that's not too much of a fly in the ointment, because what we're talking about here is just a quick way of starting a competition. What we hope is that there'll be enough people participating that we can gather some data and see what works and what doesn't. I mean, I've been mulling over the idea of scoring for quite a few months, and at the end of the day, I realized the only way to test it properly was to put it out there and see how it goes. So I've fired a couple of thoughts down on here about the general concepts. It can be revised. It probably will be revised at the end of the year. I haven't made any specific provision for multi-day routes or for tandems, but if people want to do tandem hike and fly, if they want to do multi-day hike and fly, so flying out, camping and flying back, then please do, and let's see how it goes. So the scoring system, I hope, is quite simple and should be explained by this diagram. You get scored for the distance that you cover over the ground. That includes walking. So walking and flying is allowed. Any travel over ground which is not assisted by mechanical means, and that can be scored. You walk up a hill to find a takeoff, and wherever you launch from, you score 1% of the height in meters. Fly and land, and you'll score the height that you land at in meters, and so on and so forth. You don't score the height of your last landing. That's just to try and bring a little bit of averaging into the scoring system. But I hope it's apparent that you can rack up quite a high score by either top landing on hills, landing on a hill, kiting up and relaunching. Lots of hopefully clever ways to accumulate points. Now, with the recording of your tracks, most flight instruments will only by default score your flying time. Most of them do that by sensing your travel speed, and when you fly over, say, 4 meters a second, they then switch into recording mode. So there's a number of apps you can get on your phone, like Komoot, URanger, which are designed for hiking and cycling and all the rest of it, but which are also perfectly suitable for this type of activity. It's pretty clear to see from a person's speed whether they're hiking or flying. And the XC Track flying navigation app, the XC Tracer device that Tim knows all about, and Skytrax, I know, can be configured to start recording as soon as you switch them on. So once you've chosen your route, once you've been out and had a hike and a fly, just send it to scottishhikeandfly@gmail.com and include a copy of your BHPA card so I can verify you're a member and that you're pilot rated, and we can start scoring the league up. So far to date, we've had 6 flights in 2021, 3 from Mike, 3 hike and fly days, I should say. 1 from myself and 2 from a guy called Mark Leyland, who's flying out on the West Coast. And it's been quite interesting to see how people make the best use of the terrain in their local area. And for this next slide, I'd like to show you one of Mike's days, which he took in the Pentlands. So this is starting just down at the dry ski slope in Edinburgh. And Mike first walks up Caircutton Hill. The red arrow is walking, flies down and makes a slope landing here. Then walks up again to Alamere Hill, flies down, and so on and so forth. And for each of these flights, he scores the height of the takeoff and the height of the landing. Actually making 2 crossings over the Glencorse Reservoir as well, which I think is some pretty interesting flying. And then on this last flight, this last hike, Mike comes back up to the top of Alamere Hill. Now, as part of the scoring, you can't score the same hill twice. So unfortunately, he doesn't pick up any points for this takeoff. And because this is his last flight of the day, he doesn't pick up any points for landing. He still picks up distance, and that distance continues until he gets back to the car and stops his tracking. Now, that was, in my mind, that was a pretty impressive use of some fairly tight terrain to score some points. This is what the score sheets for that flight would look like. Sorry, I keep on saying flight, but it is hike and fly. And you can see his distance is 12.5 kilometers. And the elapsed time for that was 3¼ hours. However, in those 3¼ hours, Mike also climbed 5 hills and he scored off 4 of them. So he gets almost 45 points. In XC League terms, that's a 45-kilometer flight, which is not bad going for 3¼ hours, especially in January. So I hope what I'm proposing here will be an entertaining distraction, at least until we're all allowed to go and fly cross country again, and until we'll be able to get people to pick us up and drive us back to our cars. So the kit that we use, and I feel like I'm probably going over a little bit of what Tim has touched upon, and also Reese as well. The kit that we use, certainly in winter, tends to be more weighted towards gliding down. So this is my bag. It's 45 litres and it contains everything that I need, and it weighs about 8 kilos. With the when the spring conditions come around, it might be more beneficial for me to carry an XC wing and try and apply the same scoring to being able to make some distance by flying. My goal with this would be able to do hike and fly item returns or hike and fly triangles, maybe even throwing in an overnight stay while I do it. But I'm well aware that I'm quite new both to flying and to organising any sort of competition. So I think that might be a little bit ambitious for me at the moment. I'd like to share this photo with you. This was taken on the east end of Leotach, which is a 3,000 foot ridge just outside of Torridon. For me, this photo illustrates what hike and fly can entail in Scotland. This is a nasty, precipitous-looking ridge with an open valley to the south and a convergence to the east of it, just behind the hill in this photo. The top of it is covered in scree, and it's generally a pretty nasty place to be. Certainly when I'm doing hike and fly with my level of ability, I spend a lot more time hiking than I do flying. So a lot of my decisions with regards to kit that I carry are weighted towards spending a day in the outdoors. One of the best pieces of kit that I've bought over the last year has been a bothy shelter, which has meant that when conditions are like this, I can sit in the top and keep my kit dry and wait to see if conditions improve. However, on this day, we did actually manage to get a flight, and I do say we because I was able to fly off this with a tandem with my long-suffering girlfriends. The next slide, oh, the star there shows where we managed to find a takeoff in all of that. And the next slide shows the takeoff. That's a tiny strip of grass, which is probably about 50 feet wide by about 40 feet long, was all we could find to launch our tandem from. So it's quite an entertaining day. It wasn't a day that I'd done with the Hike and Fly League in mind. I just thought that these two photos were quite good illustrations of some of the terrain that you can expect to encounter when you go wandering off the beaten track in Scotland. And that, you'll be glad to know, is the end of my slideshow. So at this point, I believe it is traditional to share the contact details for the league. If you wish to get in touch, if you wish to enter a series of flights, or if you've got any further questions, please do get in touch using the links below. I'm not sure if those addresses will be able to be clickable on the PowerPoint, but if they're not, we can drop those into the chat afterwards.
Sam, that's great. And I think it's really interesting to see you embracing this. And I didn't know until you sent the presentation that I was going to feature in it. So thanks for that. I'll send you the $5. But
thanks very much, Mike. Every little helps.
Absolutely. But I think it's good. It's a different way of doing things, and it'll be interesting to see if it takes off. Do you see it mainly as being a winter thing, or do you see it as a year-round thing?
Well, that's something that I'm really not sure about, because the XC League, which I use as an example, runs a summer season and a winter season, which seems to be quite appropriate. I was in a bit of a hurry to get this out, this idea out before the new year, just so I could say it's an annual league. It's almost a data collection exercise, if it were not quite a lot of fun. So we can see how it goes, and we can see what sort of flights people are putting in as the year progresses. I know for myself personally, I'm probably going to be looking towards doing more flying like this over the summer than I will be looking to go on big trips to go XC, just simply while the whole coronavirus thing is getting sorted out. I don't honestly know how it's going to pan out, but I really hope that there will be a way to apply this in the summer as well as in the winter. I mean, it's been a lot of fun just whizzing around our local hills and seeing how many summers we can bag. I can certainly vouch for that.
Yeah, and presumably there would be nothing to stop in the summer to connecting some thermic flights.
Oh no, 100% not. You could see this as either a peak bagging exercise with bonuses for distance, or you could see it as a distance covering exercise with bonus for peaks. If you were to fly a 30-kilometer triangle, but to top land on two hills at the corners to your triangle, then you could, I mean, that would be an exceptional piece of flying, but you could also rack up quite a good score. And I'm really trying not to be too prescriptive with it, and just seeing what people will do if they decide to take this up. It doesn't require any special kits, and I hope that it's the kind of thing that will capture someone's imagination.
There's a question in from Ollie Bear saying, will you be able to score over multiple days?
Yes, I don't see any reason why not. I haven't haven't got that far in terms of writing a rule about it, but I think the number of people who are looking to do that will be quite slim. I think there's no reason why we couldn't just do a little league section for multi-day trips and a league section for single-day trips. If it were a multi-day trip, then your distance counter would not reset at the end of the first day. You know, so you could probably string out a circuit flight or an out and return. It's a good idea.
Anyone else got any other comments or questions to Sam or feedback on what he's done so far? It is up on Facebook, so if people can have a look at it on Facebook, that would be good. Can you put links up on the chat? Yep. Okay. I'll see if I can do that.
Yeah, I can do that.
Or if you can do that, Sam, that would be good. Well, if there's no other specific questions to Sam, and not much more to say other than thank you, Sam, very much. And also thanks for putting so much effort into something that could be of interest to a lot of people. And yeah, if anyone can help Sam with his testing and getting it sorted, that would be really good. So that was a great evening as far as I'm concerned for an LLSC club night with both Tim and Sam. Great stuff. We also have some more coming up. So just to warn you now about what's coming, I'll send out links about less than a week before they start. But on the 4th of March, which is actually going to take place after the LLSC AGM at about 8 p.m, Tim Bridle's going to be talking about the 31st of May 2017, which is quite possibly the biggest day in Scottish paragliding history, when there were some really big flights. Tim flew a Scottish record from Aberfoyle to Nairn, about 174k, across some really impressive terrain. And he's going to be looking at various flights that day. So I think that'll be really, really exciting. And then on the 24th of March, Warwick Lister K is going to give a talk that he's already done to Thames Valley, but I think it deserves a much wider audience. It's fantastic. That's going to be about flying in the Highlands. And that will also be with a chat from Shemek, who is going to be talking about tracking devices, inReaches, spots, setting them up, using them, etc. So again, that hopefully will be another inspirational and informative evening. So unless anyone has got anything else to say or add, I guess that's it. Wish I lived in Scotland. When the weather's good, yep. Fantastic idea, yeah. Good, okay. Well, it doesn't look like there's anything, yeah. Someone's talking about the Zoom links sent out earlier. Well, I put it out on most of the Telegram groups, so hopefully people will distribute them more widely, but yeah. Thanks everyone. Oh, Tim Chapman's got a comment.
Just a quick one. I kayak in the west coast of Scotland. Has anybody done kayak flying? Stuck a wing in their kayak and flown off some islands as they traveled around? I'd love to know if you have.
I'm really thinking about it, Tim. I've got this right up my sleeve. I've tied up so many hills. I was on the Hills of Craig last year, and I'm bang up for it. So yes, I have thought about it. I haven't done it.
Ben Johnson,
okay.
Great.
In addition to Ollie's point, then we're also going to be scoring kayak hike fly in the Hike and Fly League. You heard it here first. You two, may the best man win.
Okay, just Tim on that. A couple of people have canoe kayaked in to Sullivan and flown off Sullivan. Fred, in fact, Fred's here. Fred, you can talk about it.
Nothing to talk about.
Give me a few sentences. I'd love to hear.
nothing to talk about really, excepting to say that you can actually do it. It's not particularly far up the loch. I think it's about 8k, is it, Loch Vearty? Something like that, 8 to 10k, with a few islands and picnics places on the way. A nice stream and what have you to camp at the bottom of Sulvan, and you can on a summer's day you can be on the top of Sulvan the same day actually. It's just such a nice thing to do whether you fly or not, quite frankly. So definitely would advertise that for folk. Yeah.
Oh, I was gutted. I had an ozone ultralight all ready to go for the 5 days I was kayaking last summer, and the weather was rubbish, and so kayaking round where we Jura, and never took off, sadly.
Yeah, I should say, and I haven't done this, but just for those people without a kayak, what did occur to me was to hire one of the fishing boats on Vearty. They've got the fishermen have them, particularly early in the year when they're not using them, from the Inch and Damp Hotel, or I've forgotten the name of the estate up there, but the estate have them as well. But the Inch and Damp Hotel will keep you right as to where to get a wee fishing boat, but an open kayak. I don't know if you're into sea kayaks or the Canadian,
It's a sea kayaking is what I do.
Yeah. I must admit, I'm not sure how you get your kit in there, but we're all pretty inventive, particularly with a lighter weight kit. So I'm sure that's quite possible. But yeah, that's a trip I'd like to do again. I've got a gammy knee at the minute, but that's on my suddenly become important to me to get my knee fixed and go and climb Sulvan again. Yeah.
And Tony Blacker's got a question. Have you, Tony?
So the idea of taking to the water and flying sounds great. I've got a thing called a pack raft, which weighs in at 1 kilogram, so you can fly with it. So you couldn't take your canoe in your wing with you, but you could take your pack raft. I certainly wouldn't want to go up locks and things and across the sea with it, but it's another option to consider. I haven't found an excuse to combine the two yet.
That's great.
Okay, anything else, anyone? Well, thank you very much indeed once again to Sam and to Tim, and all the best for some flying to come. It actually looks like it might be flyable here on Tuesday, so fingers crossed. Bye, everyone.
Thanks very much, Mike.
Bye.
Cheers, Sam.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys. Good night.
Cheers, guys.